On this episode of Forever Spinning, we take a trip to Berlin as we dive into one of David Bowie's most legendary and genre-bending albums as we discuss Low. After Bowie's Thin White Duke era, he had enough of the Los Angeles culture, and more specifically, the drug culture that inhabited the city, as he had picked up a pretty nasty cocaine habit. In late 1976, he had enough and decided that he wanted to move to Berlin with one of his pals, Iggy Pop of the Stooges fame. It was in Berlin that he would create three of his most iconic records, releasing Low and Heroes in 1977 and Lodger in 1979. These three records are often called the Berlin Trilogy. A lot of different factors went into the art direction for Low, as Bowie wanted to change himself yet again. And while working on Low, Bowie ended up producing Iggy Pop's debut solo album, The Idiot, an album that I will definitely be talking about on this channel at some point. On The Idiot, Bowie and Pop both decided to steer away from the typical glam rock sound that Bowie was known for and opted to take in the German culture around them. Groups like Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, and New were all hugely influential on Bowie and the sound direction that he wanted to take both The Idiot and Low. For instance, Warsaw off of Low is completely evident of this, as it definitely sounds much more like electronic and crunk, something that Bowie was totally into at the time. Another huge influence on Bowie would come from his new friend, the ambient godfather, Brian Eno. Eno actually ended up helping to create Low, getting credits on many of the different tracks, and most specifically Warsaw. But the last giant piece of the puzzle that was needed to create Low comes from producer Tony Visconti. Visconti was no stranger to Bowie, as he had helped produce a number of his albums, starting with The Man Who Sold the World, then Diamond Dogs, and Young Americans. So what happens when you take a recovering cocaine addict, a radicalized punk, an ambient pioneer, and a still up-and-coming producer, and put them all into this small little room in Berlin? Well, you get Low, a record that, at the time, nobody really wanted. So much so that when Bowie sent the master copies to executives at RCA, he received a letter back pleading for him not to release this album and instead make more music like he did on Young Americans. At the time, though, can you really blame them? I doubt they expected a record of this much change, a record that the front side has a lot more catchier, shorter songs, and the B-side are just long, almost all instrumental tracks. This coming from a guy who is basically on top of the glam rock world, selling millions and millions of copies. And not to mention, due to his attempt to kick his cocaine habit, Bowie was writing some of his moodiest and darkest lyrics to date. And this record also lacked a true radio single, or at least according to the RCA executives. But despite constant setbacks and letdowns, Low finally saw the light of day when RCA released it on January 14th, 1977. The first single to be released alongside of Low was Sound and Vision, which was released on February 11th, 1977. Originally, this track was written to be an instrumental, with backing vocals from Visconti's wife, Mary Hopkin. However, Bowie was able to come up with some lyrics for this song, as he talks about being alone in his room and the things that he sees and hears. This idea of being alone in a room represents his depression and his battle against cocaine, especially when he begins to describe the room, saying that it's blue and without windows. The song did very well on the charts in Europe, topping out at 3 on the UK charts, 6 on the German charts. However, stateside, it only reached 69 on the US charts. Next up, Be My Wife was a single released on June 17th, 1977. This song actually never even made it into the charts, but Bowie would occasionally play the song live. Opening up to a ragtime piano, this song breaks up the constant flow of electronic music that we've become accustomed to throughout this record. It acts as a breath of fresh air, much like Bowie needed his breath of fresh air when he moved from LA to Berlin. This song's lyrical content revolves around Bowie asking his then wife, Angela Bowie, not to divorce him. He explains in the song that he's traveled around the world and he's been with countless people, but he still feels lonely from time to time and knows that she feels the exact same way. In the end, though, he just basically pleads her to stay with him. They would eventually divorce in 1980 when Bowie basically refused to move to Switzerland from Berlin for Angela. So I guess in the end this song just didn't work. So the last single to be released from this album was Breaking Glass. However, it was not intended to be used as a promotion for Low. Instead, the single was released as a live version to promote Bowie's Isolore 2 tour. With that being said though, I will just talk about the song that was actually put on the album. This is a rather straightforward rock song with a bit of synth flair, giving it that art rock touch. The lyrics, on the other hand, are puzzling and they're fractured. Most likely, Bowie was channeling his near mental breakdowns that he was having while trying to write this album due to him withdrawing from cocaine. He became delusional, and the lyrics are evident of this, as he doesn't even speak in full sentences. Nonetheless, the song itself is incredibly interesting, especially in the context with the rest of Low. To be blunt, Low is one of my favorite records of all time, not just even in Bowie's discography, but I seriously mean like all time. And today, the day that this video is actually being uploaded onto YouTube, is the anniversary of David Bowie's death. This album is an emotional trip for me every single time that I listen to it. That doesn't mean I always feel sad when I listen to it, it just means that I always end up feeling something. Every single track off of this album is a piece of pure raw art. And as much as I love Bowie and need to credit him for creating this album, I also kind of need to credit Iggy Pop, Tony Visconti, and Brian Eno for helping him out. I think this album just would have been a hobbled, unlistenable mess if Bowie did it by himself, especially since he was trying to kick cocaine. Every single one of those people ended up pushing this album into the future. It was light years ahead of its time in 1977, and even sometimes when I listen to it today, it feels like it's above half the records that come out in 2020. This record just wows me every single time that I spin it. And Bowie's made some other really fantastic records, from Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust to Station to Station and Black Star, but to me, they all pale in artistic comparison when it comes to Low. This is Bowie at his creative and experimental peak, trying to change not only his own life, but his sonic image as well, or sound and vision. This record, despite it being difficult to get into on a first listen and really hard to grasp the first time you really hear it, it is one of the most relatable art rock records ever released. That is because we have all felt like Bowie on this album. Well, maybe not the cocaine addict part, but we've all probably found ourselves sitting alone in a room just like he did in Sound and Vision. We've all longed to just lay back and forget about the troubles of the world, just like the way that the song Warsaw feels. And we've all made mistakes that we just didn't learn from, just like in the song Always Crashing in the Same Car. Despite this record coming from a man that we oftentimes associate to be otherworldly, he certainly made an album that feels extraordinarily human. Fly high, Ziggy Stardust, and thank you for this record. So, whether you've never heard this record before, or if it is a personal favorite of yours, David Bowie's Low will always be forever spinning. Thanks for watching.